Starlight isn't working. No wait, before you get your torches and pitchforks, hear me out. I've shared some of these ideas with a collection of my friends before, and I've been accused of being averse to changing the show as a result, so I'd like to take this opportunity to dispel that idea before anything else. I'm perhaps the biggest proponent of both Twilicorn and the cutie map you'll ever encounter, and the idea of a character like Starlight is something I also appreciate. With Season 5, the staff anticipated that they were running out of new ground to cover with the show, and by giving Twilight a student, they created a way to re-explore old ideas in a way that still felt fresh. The trouble is that they executed this idea in probably the strangest and most inconsistent way possible. But rather than explain why directly, I think it'd be more effective to instead state what I'd have done to illustrate my point. First, I want you to think of the common reasons people dislike Starlight. I'm gonna take a wild guess and say that, quote, she's a sunset ripoff is pretty high on that list. Of course, this is not without reason. Both are powerful unicorns who started as villains and rivals to Twilight, were reformed, and went on to learn friendship from the main six, and specifically Twilight herself. Both would later go on to use those lessons to better the world around them, and eventually become equivalent to Twilight, even going so far as to occasionally serve as a stand-in. Conceptually speaking, the two are pretty similar. However, this didn't have to be the case. Consider for a moment that in the Equestria Girls universe, there is a human counterpart to every character in Equestria. Logically, this should include Sunset Shimmer, yet despite the high fandom demand, the EQG world Sunset has never been introduced. One of the popular criticisms of Starlight's reformation was that it'd supposedly be more effective to just bring Equestria's Sunset back to play a similar role, which, as it would happen, was also one of the fandom's more common hopes for the show at the time. But what this criticism fails to realize is that if she's in Equestria, then she can't be in the human world at the same time. I don't think anyone will argue with me when I say Sunset is what makes EQG, and without her the series quickly loses its identity, which I hypothesize is why they did not do this. And suddenly, the similarities between her and Starlight start to make a lot more sense. The human world Sunset was hypothetically never exposed to friendship like the reformed Equestrian Sunset has. If the original Sunset was so attracted to power beforehand, then wouldn't it make sense for her counterpart to be as well? Therefore, I believe the best of both worlds would be to introduce this Sunset as a villain and reform her in a similar manner as was done to both her counterpart and Starlight. Preferably, the original Sunset is the main drive for this, bringing her redemption arc to a close in a time predating Sci-Twi. And since Equestria's Twilight brought her to the light, it would only make sense Equestria's Sunset would send her counterpart to Equestria to take her place and learn from Twilight as she had. What we have as a result is a character who stands in for Starlight and the reason she was brought in quite effectively, as well as ties up Sunset's arc in a way that keeps EQG working, all while fulfilling the fandom's wish to have Sunset in the main show. Albeit you don't get the character moment of her mending fences with Celestia because this is technically still a different character, but the rest of the personality is largely intact. When you consider an option like this, a decision like reforming Starlight seems pretty left fieldish by comparison, but the unfortunate fact is she was reformed, and here we are 2.5 seasons later. But hey, maybe they do some interesting things with her anyway, and it all winds up being worth it. Wait, no, I've already made this video, haven't I? So, yeah, obviously that didn't happen. So, the start of Season 6. Starlight is a strange way of going about the matter of giving Twilight a student, but there is a lot of potential in the idea. One would think that after Season 5 neglected the overarching story that 4 had, Starlight would be a perfect way to bring back this element in full force, doubly so since her reformation was a tad rushed, so she could use the extra screen time. Why not kill 2 birds with 1 stone? So of course, that's exactly what Season 6 didn't do. Make no mistake, there were some episodes like No Second Prances where Starlight was indeed the focus of development, but other times it seems as though episodes originally meant for her are awarded to other characters. Thorax, for instance, was reformed by Spike. I feel the result of this is most evident in the finale. That episode, To Where and Back Again, focuses on a cast of reformed characters going on a quest to save the originals from Chrysalis. This episode introduces a focus on a strange element though, Starlight's capabilities as a leader. I've spoken previously on how this makes an interesting character arc for Starlight. However, the fact that it stretches multiple seasons without a significant amount of focus leads me to believe it entirely accidental. Not that it isn't a good thing, mind you, but it's sort of hard to account for something that wasn't intentional at first. What would make more sense, however, is if Starlight had learned friendship by, well, actually making friends over the course of Season 6, each one teaching her a different lesson, all of which she would go on to use in the finale, wherein she leads her friends to save the original cast. Kinda like what she did with Trixie, except with more characters and as a season arc. It would make much more sense for her character arc to focus on her own own growth with the magic of friendship by learning it and subsequently applying it to save the world as Twilight had done before her. This is even further implied by the plot of the Season 7 premiere of Celestial Device, as after such a point it wouldn't be necessary for Starlight to be a student anymore. She would be ready to graduate and have demonstrated such. But as we all know, Starlight ended up not only lacking an equivalent to this character arc, but being rather underutilized in Season 6 entirely. Which of course leads us to Celestial Device itself, and I don't need to tell most of you that this was a particularly egregious example of Starlight being poorly used. Celestial Device infamously offered 3 different interesting ways in which Starlight's character could have progressed: as a co-wizard to Sunburst in the Crystal Empire, an equestrian ambassador to Ember and the Dragon Horde, or as an expat teaching the changelings how to not be a parasite. Instead of going down one of these perfectly good routes, however, Celestial Device made the brilliant decision to kick its heels in and stubbornly do nothing. I'm sorry, but even Celestia's best outing in the entire series isn't a consolation. Of course, you've likely gathered by this point that I would have done something different. Specifically, I'd have sent her to be an assistant with Trixie's traveling magic show. You know, building on something they had already established her as doing? And why not? This would give the show a vehicle to explore its unique locales and develop both a desperately misused character and a fan favorite from all the way back in Season 1. This would also increase the variety in the show, as we would have yet another new episode format to add to that of the main 6, CMC and Spike. Furthermore, the different scenarios and creatures she would encounter along the way would provide the greatest amount and variety of ways for her to grow. Heck, many of the episodes Starlight was given in Season 7 wouldn't even need to be altered much to fit. To Change Changeling was already about Starlight and Trixie traveling to the Changeling Hive. A magic show is only an extra excuse. A Royal Problem, by contrast, requires only minor alterations. Rather than the cutie map sending Starlight there, it's simply on the route she and Trixie are traveling. The magic show itself even creates an excuse to write Trixie into the background, which would be true of any episode featuring them provided it wasn't used too frequently. And that's just one possibility. On the other hand, being in the Crystal Empire with Sunburst provides plenty of opportunity to flesh out not only both him and Starlight, but Cadence and Shining Armor by proxy. Not to mention the world building. Considering how many festivals and traditions Equestria has, I find it unlikely the Crystal Empire's only equivalent is the Crystalling. Or if we really want to go down that route, much of the same would apply to the Dragon Horde and the characters therein as well if she were to do that instead. Not to mention, it'd provide plenty of opportunity to focus on at least one of the nations adapting to the introduction of equestrian-style friendship into their culture. And considering the Dragon's brutish history and new leader, it makes sense to focus on them in particular, seeing as they're the ones making the biggest jump. Personally though, I struggle to think of many unique stories that could come out of this possibility. Of course, none of these happened, and Starlight instead opted to hang around Ponyville for reasons. Now, it'd be one thing if Starlight received a lack of focus in Season 7 entirely, not unlike Season 6 before, but as I demonstrated in my last video, that is not the case. Starlight in fact stars in 5 episodes, counting both parts of Shadowplay separately. However, if we do the math, to split 26 episodes across her, Spike, and each of the main 6 leaves only 3.25 episodes per character. This does not account for Discord, the CMC, or anything else. Considering this equation, it is especially frustrating that Starlight does not receive a proper story arc this season. If, however, she was to perhaps go down any of the past Celestial Device laid out, then the extra time would make sense, as it'd be experimenting with a new episode format, and writing a character arc for both Starlight and likely whoever else she's around. And of course there's the ongoing Season 8, wherein Starlight became the guidance counselor of Twilight's new school of friendship. The obvious thing to do here would be to throw a few episodes Starlight's way to explore this role as a vector for character growth, if not a season arc involving the school and students. It's not as though School Days didn't leave a perfect foundation after all. If you've picked up on the pattern by now, that's obviously not what happened for the first half of the season, though bear in mind the second could easily turn around and throw egg in my face. To this season's credit though, Starlight did play a minor role in Marks for Effort in helping sorting out CozyGlow's attempt to get the CMC into the school. Sadly, that's all she's done this season though. Instead, there were only 4 episodes about the school, counting School Days as 2 episodes of course. A grand total of 0 of which stars Starlight. Come to think of it, she hasn't had much limelight at all this season. Some people will be leaping for joy about that, I'm sure, but I'm still here wondering where that main character treatment went. Considering all this inconsistency, I'm not surprised the Starlight haters are so numerous.
But I'm not done yet!
Ah yes, the bit I was saving for last, and totally didn't just add in after the script was half recorded. The backstory. I'm not gonna waste your time going over the problems with it, not only because everyone and their mother's already done that, but also because things have changed slightly in the 2.5 seasons since. Case in point, Sharpwits recently put out a video refuting the complaints about said backstory using new information from more recent episodes, and I feel it's better to argue with up-to-date information.
Think about it. Starlight was a kid. Their minds worked differently. Likely Sunburst was her only friend at that time, possibly because of her dad, maybe something else. But anyways, they were inseparable, but suddenly Sunburst got his cutie mark, and since his mother was always trying to be in control of his future, it's obvious she decided right away to send him to Celestia's school. At the possibility of him being ashamed of not doing so good and ignoring all the letters from their hometown, no matter if it's from his mother or Starlight, and suddenly we have a little kid who was all alone with no friends right after said friend got his cutie mark. Things like this can be enough to traumatize a child's mind, and if the impact was strong enough, it could twist her entire worldview even when she hits the adult age. She probably tried to write a letter, but when she met with no response, it only fueled her pain. Thus her child mind started producing ridiculous theories that for her make sense, and we all know that theory. She lost her friend because of cutie mark, and likely because of cutie marks and previous possible reasons of not having more friends, she didn't try to socialize with other kids. Was she confirmed in the show that she was afraid of history repeat itself?
Now, if you've been watching me for a while, then you're probably expecting me to build up a bit of anticipation before making one bold statement that refutes the whole argument, and then proceeding to explain that statement in detail. You know, like how my content has always worked. The thing with that is, his argument isn't necessarily wrong. The problem is it shouldn't exist in the first place. I will concede that the new details presented in episodes like the Parent Map do make Starlight's backstory more reasonable from a purely canonical standpoint. But now if you want to watch her backstory in the cutie remark with this information to explain what that episode does not, then you need to either skip ahead to the Parent Map and spoil a lot of what comes in between before watching it, or go back and rewatch the cutie remark again after watching the Parent Map and everything in between. As a general rule of thumb, if the audience ever needs to read your story out of order for part of it to make sense, and this wasn't your intention from square one, then you're probably not telling your story properly. At no point should the audience need to do the legwork to make your story coherent. So the simple response to this argument that you were probably expecting from me is, but that's not good storytelling though. Thus is my frustration with Starlight, not with her presence, but a rap sheet of misuse 2.5 seasons long, and if the current pattern holds, it looks as though that's the way it's gonna stay. But since we're on the topic, I suppose it's worth going over what a good Starlight episode for Season 8 might look like. After all, if I'm going to go through the trouble of defending the notion that Starlight is a dumpster fire of a character, then I may as well talk about how to salvage whatever's left. My proposal is as follows. The episode opens on Starlight reorganizing her office again. It's not like Cozy needed her help for very long after all, but she's feeling confidence in herself after that success, even going so far as to claim she's ready for anything. Cue one of the main six entering unannounced with a bickering Gallus and Sandbar in tow, the latter in a disheveled and unkempt state commanding the audience's interest. The two have found themselves in a disagreement on whether a prank of Gallus's, one aimed at Acellus, has gone too far. To punctuate the point that this prank really was extreme, perhaps Sandbar could mention something about one of the other student six needing to console Acellus. In response to the obvious cue, Starlight takes Sandbar's side and refers to Twilight's manual to bar these sorts of pranks, a decision that leaves Gallus apprehensive. We stick with Starlight for just long enough for her to reaffirm her confidence in this decision, before cutting to Gallus on the following day. It is learned here that he had made plans for a similar stunt with Smolder, but now with the teachers keeping him in earshot, he cannot execute on this. But for the same reason, and a side of embarrassment, he can't bring himself to tell Smolder outright either, instead dodging the conversation in a very conspicuous manner, thus leaving the dragon with a sense of confusion and concern. This is something Starlight is later able to pick up on, and after a bit of interrogation, she's able to extract the source from a hesitant Smolder. After seeing the dragon on her way, Starlight now feels forced to ease off on Gallus. In turn, she brings the griffin back to her office, and the two reach a compromise that boils down to Acellus is off limits, and so is blowing up the gym. Not the next day, however, a flaw with this too is revealed when a specifically new student comes to Starlight in her own prank aftermath, explaining that she'd been greeted her first day with a practical joke. The trouble here comes, however, in that this particular prank was well within the terms Starlight had established with Gallus. However, not wanting to make the same mistake a third time, she instead brings all the staff to bear after realizing her error. The episode's moral can be given in said meeting when she explains why she's assembled the staff, the message being that no solution is one size fits all. The episode ends on Gallus executing on a more reserved prank that this time leaves everyone satisfied, with staff making sure to certify that all's in accordance with the rules, cutting to the credits on his chagrin of course. Notice how this episode makes Starlight the core of its story and teaches her the lessons, whilst also integrating her role as the guidance counselor and using that to frame its story, taking the opportunity to incorporate the Student 6. But unfortunately, an episode like this does not currently exist, so instead we're left to wait and see what the second half of Season 8 does. Thanks for watching. Remember to like, comment, subscribe, and share. This is Onyx the Dragon, signing out.